Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Pat. I'm doing okay.
Are you sure? You doing okay?
Are you there, bud?
I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
That was really weird.
Are you there?
I'm there.
We're all here. Everyone's here.
That was weird as hell. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
Oh, we're back again. So here we are. Hi, how are you? Let's start again. No one noticed that.
Good evening.
It's been a fun day today. I'll show you why it's been a fun day today. Some people who follow me on Twitter may already know this. But the April-May merch is dropping. So let's let people know what's happening. We have got available for you at bhnshop.nz our regular hoodies and t-shirts. We have got available for you our newly introduced hoodies and t-shirts that you can get customized with your name on the back. And for this month only, we have on bhnshop.nz our Buffer branded gear. Our Buffer branded gear this month comes in grey and black t-shirts and hoodies. You see them there, grey and black. And as you will probably connect with straight away, some particular colours within that Buffer wording enables us to also do a bit of a fundraiser for MAP. And MAP is Medical Aid for Palestinians. They are in Gaza, helping bring medical aid to Palestinians. They are helping with the famine. They are helping with emergency situations. They're in there doing it. I think they're a UK-based business. I've actually messaged them and said, would you like to come on the show? We'd love to hear more about you. What we're going to do, you and I, you and me, us and we and you, is every single piece of Buffer merch that is purchased, and this will go for its normal week and a bit, we will give 25% of the profits to MAPS. So if every t-shirt, every hoodie that's purchased, 25% of the profits from it will go to medical aid for Palestinians. So if you are interested in both supporting us and supporting a charity doing good work in Gaza as we speak, then you can head to bhnshop.nz and get some Buffer gear. I am myself, Chewy. I'm going to get one of the grey hoodies. How do you feel about that?
Nice. I quite like the black.
You like that?
But that's my aesthetic.
So maybe me and Chewy will purchase a grey one and a black one, and then we'll donate some of the money directly, and then the rest of it is up to you. If you're interested in coming on board, helping us out a bit, we talked a bit last night about Patreon and what we're trying to do with Patreon to get 50 new patrons signed up. This is another way that you can both wear us proudly on your chests and also support what we do. And if you want to be a part of the whānau by having personalised stuff, just remember to click the personalised hoodie or personalised t-shirt label. A couple of people last year clicked the straight hoodie one and then told us what their names were. We did it because there was one or two people who made a mistake. Not a big deal, but I'll probably be a bit harsher this month around. So if you want the personalised gear, because it costs us more to produce, it costs another $10 for you to buy, then make sure you click on that. And also, when you're filling out your details for your address, you have to put down, it's an honesty box type situation, whether you are a rural delivery or not. The system doesn't pick it up based on your address. If you know that you're normally a rural delivery, please check the rural delivery box. And if you know that you're not normally, then please do not. Because, especially for the Buffer gear, postage and stuff comes out of the profits. And so we've got to get that right. And that enables us to get as much as possible off to MAPS. And let's be honest, it's not going to be a huge millions of dollars, but we'll do our little bit. And when we speak to MAPS, we'll also give you all the details. Well, we can give you that now. So if you're interested in just donating straight to them, they are map.org.uk. Gaza Emergency, please support our urgent response. So there you go. Nice. You down with that, Chewy?
I am very much down with that, Pat.
Down like DJ Brown or something like that?
Down with the kids.
Anything else happening today? Anything else we need to know about?
From me, not so much. I was just saying that today's one of those a bit of a low energy day for me. Today I got home, I made dinner, and I fell asleep on the couch. So party hard. I'm a man of action
and hate those days because I've always been a power napper. So if I grab 10, 15, 20 minutes, then I'm up till 2 in the morning. There's nothing I can do about it. It's both great because it helps me if I'm exhausted, and it's a hindrance. It's a blessing and a curse all at the same time, Chewy. A blessing and a curse. Speaking of merch, you're rocking the black top today. I just noticed that.
Hey,
you can be the
still,
model.
It's still lovely and fluffy and warm after being through the wash. So that's a good sign.
I've actually got my white one out here. There you go. Looked after it very well, didn't I? Throwing in behind the thing. So there's the white hoodie there as well. Bit chillier today. How did you find the day? It's a bit cold. Nice, lovely, fine day, but the temperature's starting to drop.
Yeah, apparently at one point it was 21 degrees. I don't know if I believe that.
I don't know if I believe that either. I don't know if I believe that at all. Hey, in the show tonight, welcome to the show. We are going to be talking about the current government's change to the RMA. We are going to talk about the current government's what some are calling dangerous moves when it comes to the environment and how it may impact us in the future. That's all to do with the RMA. We are also going to be having a look at the select committee stage of the gang laws and gang patch laws, because that's kicked off this week. And as we already know, there are lots of people who are saying, why are we wasting our time with this? This is not going to work. This is not a law that does anything other than create a headline, for the government who is instilling it. And we have, I know we bring this up every time, but we have our dear old mate, recently departed Chester Burrows, former police minister, former National Party minister, who we interviewed 18 months ago, I guess, telling us all about how the gang patch ban was nothing more than that's Chewy just talking to me, nothing more than a headline grabber. Yet they'll do it again and they'll try and justify it. So we're going to be having a look at that as well. Hope everyone's doing good in the chat. We just might as well start off by saying thanks, Nick, for the super chat. Arrives late in Italian. $5. Thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate that. Okay, so whilst we wait for Chewy to come in, maybe we'll get to some video footage. Maybe we will start with the changes to the RMA and the concerns that many are voicing to do with what the changes could do and how they could lead to environmental damage. Here's One News Tonight.
Obligations to protect the environment from farming are being watered down as part of the government's first stage of reforming the Resource Management Act. Farmers applying for resource consent will no longer have to demonstrate how their activities will impact water health. And some winter grazing regulations introduced by the previous government will be ripped up. Councils will have requirements to identify significant natural areas suspended for 3 years. Kushla Norman has reaction from farmers and environmentalists.
So farmers have less, they have to be accountable for the water, and identifying significant areas is going to be put on hold for 3 years. So like areas that we need to take care of more, no, we won't worry about that for the next 3 years, which ironically is about the same term that the First National Government's going to be in for.
Carl Dean is preparing plenty of feed for his cows over the cooler months. It's known as winter grazing. At the moment, farmers have to get a resource consent for this.
Just another layer of bureaucracy, another layer of cost that wasn't needed and was not going to add any environmental protection more than what was already happening.
Now the national regulation for winter grazing is being repealed.
People will have seen pictures of cows belly deep in mud in Southland. There are huge environmental impacts on that practice, and there are also very significant animal welfare considerations in play there. So I don't think that repealing that is justifiable in any sense.
We're just saying that we think the rules should be a lot more straightforward and simpler, and that councils with those agricultural communities can make local decisions based upon risk rather than the one-size-fits-all approach.
There are also...
This is something that this government's doing at the moment, Chewy, and we're going to reflect on this when we hear from Mr. Luxon on the AM show from this morning, is when they don't want to be involved with it, they put the responsibility onto a second party. So they don't want to be held responsible for the damage this may do to the environment. So he says very clearly, up to local councils. They can therefore make a bespoke ruling rather than a one-size-fits-all. And what that does for the government, as we'll demonstrate later on this evening when we talk about what Mr. Luxon was talking to the AM show Lloyd Burr this morning about cuts in the public sector. What it means is they get to wipe their hands of these changes and say, well, it's local government's decision, it's not our decision. And it's what they're doing with the cuts. They're saying, well, it's the chief executive who's making those decisions. It's got nothing to do with us. Even though it's kind of like this, Joy. I thought today, it's kind of like, let's say my family owned 6 cars, and let's say I went and sold all 6 of the cars. And then I said to the kids, you're welcome to drive any one of the cars we have, but Dad, you sold the 6 of them. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. You can still drive any car. Like the decisions I've made have impacted what they're able to do, but I want to remove myself from the responsibility of my teenager driving a car poorly, but I'm still going to put the onus on them not to do it. And that's what they're doing with this. They're basically absolving themselves of responsibility by saying, well, yeah, we put the framework together, but it's the local bodies that end up making the decisions. And what that means is if it turns to custard, they can just point to the local body and go, well, that's what they wanted. We're not going to step in their way. It's what they wanted. So that's what they're doing a lot at the moment, Chewie, in other legislation as well.
When it comes to winter grazing, I hate it.
Yeah,
I hate it. Any sort of thing that ends up with your stock looking like they're in some sort of concentration camp, you should probably do something about. It seems to be a southern South Island thing, and it seems to be something that these old duffers have got used to as kind of an accepted practice. It shouldn't be. It's bad for the animals. It's bad for the waterways. There's a reason that it was taken out. And this is just pandering to that segment of farmers that don't want to innovate, that don't want to do better, that just want to do things the way that they want, as they have done for generations.
Is it a practice that's more common in the bottom half of the South Island because of the conditions, like for growing? Like the top half of the North Island, obviously better growing conditions all year round, so maybe not the need for it. Could it be that, or do you really think it's just practice and what they've got used to and refuse to change?
I am not an expert when it comes to this sort of stuff, so I'm not going to pretend that I am. I think a lot of the pushback against those changes to the RMA and getting rid of winter grazing, National's argument was you can't just do one size fits all. The circumstances and the conditions are different in the North Island than they are in the South Island. But ultimately, I haven't seen an argument from farmers that seems justifiable when you look at these pictures of these animals just soaking in a good 2 or 3 feet of mud. From an animal welfare point of view, it doesn't seem like a good idea. From an optics point of view, it doesn't look like a good idea. I mean, anecdotally, I saw a story of a tourist from Germany going through that Southland and being absolutely appalled that is how we look after our animals, because that's just something that would not fly in the EU.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going and see what else the story wants to reveal to us. Reveal your worst, story.
It's all approach.
There are also changes for fencing off waterways.
So where there was low intensity farming, which is around some beef cattle, but predominantly in deer, those rules are being pulled back. But where there's intensive farming, dairy is an example, the requirements still stay in place.
So that says to me, Chewie, low intensity farming, fewer animals per hectare. But that doesn't mean that all the animals now still can't walk into the rivers and shit everywhere. Yeah, okay, so there'll only be 50 rather than 500, but that'll still massively damage our waterways if those are being reduced. And I think this is an example that what you've just said, it just comes back to lazy farming. I mean, this comes back to lazy farming, and it doesn't have to happen this way, but that just makes it easier for people who just don't want to give a shit, literally and figuratively, about their streams.
It's among a raft of changes to the Resource Management Act and Labour's environmental regulations.
It is a package of short-term measures to appease those farmers, but also it's just the start, though, of a whole lot of permissions for a lot more extractive, environmentally unfriendly and polluting activity.
Federated Farmers says it marks an end to what it calls the war on farming. But environmentalists say...
Just remember, Federated Farmers said when Jacinda Ardern left politics that farmers are losing a friend. So they said that then. They're now suggesting that a politician who was a friend of farmers was running a war on farmers. There seems to be a juxtaposition in the commenting there.
It's now the war on nature that's ramping up.
Effectively, if you're going to allow rural New Zealand to conduct its activities without proper environmental oversight and protections, that's in effect a subsidy.
The best critic of a farmer is another farmer. If we see a neighbour that's not performing, we'll go...
Really? Really? The best critic of a farmer is another farmer. So if both of the farmers are dirty, they're going to be the best critics of each other? Don't know if that stands.
Tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, pull your socks up.
The proposed law changes will be introduced to Parliament next month. Kushla Norman, One News.
I'm still with you. I was just taking,
demand for online
taking a photo of my dog. So there we go. Chewy, your thoughts? I mean, the RMA is changing, danger to the environment. Farmers are going to be able to pollute more easily, and the farmers themselves are going, well, but we won't, because we'll hold each other accountable. That's pretty much the sum total of that story.
Do you remember what a big issue river water quality was a few years ago?
Yeah.
It's going to be another issue. We're going to get back to the fact that E. coli counts in our rivers are going to go up. Look, there, and I don't want to tar all farmers with the same brush, and I don't want to lump into it this whole war on farmers. Being in New Zealand and saying that there's a war on farmers is just such a ridiculously overblown rhetoric, and is just really playing into their urban-rural divide and conquer thing, which is just absolute nonsense. What this is pointing out that our agricultural sector has changed so much in the last 30 years, maybe 40 years, where we were primarily sheep farming, and then we've transitioned to the much more profitable dairy farming.
Yeah.
And sheep can graze pasture that does not need the intensive irrigation and do not output as much into the environment. Southland's always been pretty heavy dairy, but you see that creep into Canterbury, which is able to be very drought prone. And because it's all alluvial floodplains and that sort of thing, it just goes straight into the river. You can't drink the river water anymore.
Yeah.
You can't drink like there is a constant water quality warning out where my family have a batch at the Rangitata River, and it's surrounded by dairy farms now where it was all sheep. And I just think, farmers by the nature of their work are quite independent people, and they'll just get out and do stuff, and they don't appreciate people telling them what to do. And I don't think there's a lot of people that like being told what to do, but sometimes when you're being a dickhead and you're just doing stuff because it's always the way it's been done, and someone comes in and goes, hey, the rivers are fucked, and we need you to do this thing, excuse me, then they're going to go, it's a war on farming. I've got to do more compliance. Now, there's lots of farmers out there that are replanting their riverbanks, that are letting native bush regenerate in low quality areas and gullies and stuff like that. I'm going to do it again. And all credit to them. And it's one of those things that, like, if that farmer's going around and pointing at his neighbors and going, you're doing a shit job, it's not working.
That's it. You got it. My mum used to say 1 for a wish, 2 for a kiss, 3 for a letter, 4 for something better. So you're either getting a letter if you.
Oh, I'm on a run.
Something better. What about the old bullshit idea about like best people to hold a farmer accountable as another farmer? In what industry in the world does that work? Like in what industry in the world is the regulators the best people to regulate and keep an eye on it? The people who then profit from the same system. I mean, come on. I mean, actually say that with a straight face. Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, and look, a peer criticizing you, yes, it can be a powerful motivator, but it's also incredibly regional.
Yeah, and they can't do anything about it. If your neighbour goes, pull your socks up, and you go, whereas an agency that has the ability to put on some kind of sanctions might be a better person to get him to pull his socks up.
Yeah, I don't get it. I want farmers to get on the same page as the rest of us and see that if they want to consider that there's a war on farmers, that there sometimes is a perception problem from their end. You know, the federated farmers are not doing themselves any favors by trying to argue a picture of intensive winter grazing and going, this is fine, thank you.
Yeah.
And they're not doing, I think the groundswell movement did people's perception of farmers incredible damage. And they're not seeing it.
Yeah. No.
New Zealand is an incredibly supportive place for farmers. Their economy is built on it.
Yeah.
I think they're being sold a bill of goods if they believe that the urban-rural divide is the people that live in cities don't know where their food comes from and don't like farmers. But they're just not getting it. And federated farmers needs to realise this. And they need to sort of go, hey, guys, you know, you might not be happy with us, but we have to find a middle ground. We have to find a way forward. We have to rehabilitate our image a little bit here.
Yeah. Or they don't give a shit because really when it comes down to it, it's just a commercial entity. And if they can get away with an extra 10% profit by being assholes, they'll do that. That's what I think when I hear farmers will regulate farmers.
There's not a business in the world that says, yeah, more regulation will be good things. Yeah. You know, they always fight it. But again, I think they're being used for political gain again by stoking that divide. Then you get your culture war aspects coming through, and the right has been very good at weaponizing that against the left.
Yep. And bless you, Chewy, from Mr. Arvids, just so you know, just in case you were wondering.
Yes. Thank you.
Here's something else for tonight that I didn't tell you. I have a good news story.
Oh, good. We need to sprinkle those throughout.
Yes,
our week, don't we?
I have a good news story. In fact, I've just realised I've kind of got two good news stories because I'll show you the photo I just took of my dog when I wasn't really paying attention.
Oh, snoozy nosies.
Snoozing, having a wee nun eyes in the corner of the studio. So sort of going to give you two good news stories tonight. There's that one as well. And there's one at the end, which I personally have taken a lot of notice of because it's something that's impacted my family. But that's all I'll say. You'll have to keep listening to find out what the good news story is going to be all about. A tease. Okay, let's move on to gang patches because there's a few things going on here. I've got a couple of different videos, one from one of the breakfast shows talking to a lawyer of the it's a lawyer who made a submission on behalf of women and children associated with the Mongrel Mob, which is people who are going to get caught up in this, especially when it comes to the right to associate and association being in the area with people. But first of all, let's go to the story off News Hub from this evening that gives us kind of the lowdown on the whole thing.
News Hub can reveal police wanted significant new search and seizure.
Oh, yeah. This is pretty scary. This is not what police actually wanted.
Powers to make the government's gang patch crackdown effective.
If anyone was even suspected of displaying gang insignia, the police would have had a 7-day window to search their properties and vehicles. Powers didn't make it into legislation, but as political reporter Jamie Ensor explains, police refusing to say whether they're done with the idea.
Lawyers, the police union and former gangsters walk into a select committee room to make arguments about the proposed ban on gang patches in public places.
The three key changes are all just tools adding to the toolbox of police legislation.
If the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything is a nail.
And whether police bias will lead to it disproportionately affecting Māori.
100% they will be more effective because they are more overly represented as gang members.
There is, of course, baked in systemic racism into policing.
News Hub can also reveal police told the government the proposed gang patch ban had issues, including the risk gang members would simply ignore it. While police currently have search powers, in a briefing to the minister, police said they wanted more to make the ban an effective deterrent. including that regardless of whether charges have been filed or the gang patch already taken, anyone suspected of displaying a gang patch in public should, for 7 days, be subject to searches of their property and vehicles.
So that would include,
wide.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy, eh? I mean, like, the word suspected is carrying some heavy water. What does that mean if someone's got a red handkerchief out their back pocket? It's not literally a patch, but could it be suspected? You know, basically what it's saying is if the police think you're guilty, if the police think you've broken the law, then we get 7 days to turn your whole world upside down no matter what. Not even if you are found guilty. So even if we think you are, if we think you might have broken a law, then we get free range to do anything we want to you and your family, to your household for the next 7 days. That's scary, Chewy.
Yeah, and like, when it comes to legislation and police powers, like something that wide, something that open to interpretation, something that, you know, words like suspect, you know, it's so wide, so open to abuse.
Yeah.
And police should be looking at things that are going to, you know, it's got to be focused. So that they're not open to interpretation, and they're not open to misuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's a little bit like the free speech conversation. The only people that need to have free speech conversation is people who use horrific speech. Because if you're using lovely speech all the time, then it's not relevant to you if you're using that. It kind of feels like the same. The only protections we need to have in law around crime are people who are committing the crimes. Because if you're not committing a crime, then you're never going to come under them, you know? So people kind of go, wow, you know, they shouldn't be doing it. They shouldn't be. It's like the people who are in that world are the ones who need the protection and the rights, I guess I should say rights, within that world. Because your average person who's never going to do a drive-by with a shotgun, or even let's be more accurate, be accused of doing that, is never going to have to suffer the consequences of a well or poorly written piece of legislation. So it's ironic that there seems to be kind of a double-edged sword where they're going, well, these people shouldn't be committing crimes. No, they don't commit crimes, they won't come under these kind of rulings, but they are the only people that will come under these kinds of rulings. So there seems to be a cart and a horse thing there and what's going on. So, all right, we'll keep going with the story, eh?
Police would also be able to seize all gang paraphernalia found even if it hadn't been displayed publicly.
The greater search powers could be a bit of an overreach.
Well, I think that's what my gut feeling is. That's what the courts would think, and why it might make life easier for police, and would probably welcome them. I think you have to get that balancing act right. It's inviting, but I think, you know, the bill as it stands is already challenging, you'd say, some human rights.
I'll consider any request that police put forward to me in terms of legislation that will help them enforce the law and make our country a much safer place.
There's capital punishment.
The thing about this is, right, he says that'll help them enforce the law. These are new laws. So actually just think about that. That will help them enforce the law. That's past tense, laws that are on the books. Yeah, what they're doing is they're bringing in a new range of laws to actually enforce law in a different way. So these new laws are not helping them enforce the law. They're introducing new laws to be enforced. It's future tense. Isn't that right, Chewy?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
So nothing that the government's bringing in now is going to help them enforce the law that currently exists. It's going to start a whole new realm of laws that they'll then have to enforce, which then, of course, raises the question as well, is there the manpower to do that, Chewy?
Yeah. Hey, just before we get too deep into this, have you got Michael Law's comments queued up?
I don't have them queued up. I can find them. I know where they were. I think they were on One News. I'm not using that story.
I just read the story about that because he's talking about obviously his part in the former gang patch ban.
Yeah, which didn't work at all.
No, it didn't work at all. He thinks it does, and it's just interesting how he defends it. But
I can find that. I know where it is. It's in the One News story, and I can go and queue it up on another screen while we're watching the end of these ones. So I'll get that if we want us to have a look at it. But let's just get to the end of this story from News Hub.
Punishment And so even death wasn't deterring people from committing crimes.
Police wouldn't do an interview with News Hub today, and in a statement did not specifically address questions about the proposed powers, including whether they'd still want them from the government. They said they were focused on how to enforce the new ban. Jamie Ensor, News Hub.
Well, that's just exactly what we've said. How to enforce the new ban. So Mark Mitchell saying anything that'll help them enforce the law. It's like, this is not helping people enforce the law. This is helping police, giving police new laws to enforce a new thing. I've got the lawyer queued up as well, but do you want to speak to this at all for a minute?
I don't have really any further thoughts. I mean, every time Mark Mitchell talks about a plan, I think if it's a plan that involves actual humans, I don't think he gets it. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this to death about why it's a bad idea, because it's not based on evidence, it's not based on results, it's based on the need to hit out at gangs because of a perception of toughness. The government's got to be seen to be tough.
Yeah. We're going to play Chester Burrows' statement, which we always do. Here's the piece you asked for, Chewy, because that's just how quick a producer I am.
Anything that assists the police to manage and control gangs and communities where in some cases they are out of control is a good thing.
As someone who's
anything.
The Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper came out to say a few things. So there's that. Let's move on to another part of this conversation. Same conversation. Sorry,
one piece. With Michael Laws, in his submission, he mentions one particular figure that his the gang patch ban that he brought in when he was mayor reduced gang numbers in his area by 15%. Now, I find that really interesting because, as we've discussed on the show, police weren't really tracking numbers of gang members before. So how does he know that it went down such a specific amount, 15%?
Well,
he's putting that down to people leaving the gang altogether.
Yeah.
Or leaving the area.
He can't know that. And so this is probably the appropriate time to play Chester Burrows. Chester Burrows, who spoke to us before he passed, he was the minister in charge when those gang patch laws came in. He was the local MP for that area and he supported the bill because of that. But he made it very clear towards the end of his life, quite often Tories or Republicans or conservatives, they find their heart in their final days. And sadly for his family, Chester's no longer with us, but getting towards the end of his time here on our mortal call, he started speaking out some things that were wrong, that he was very pro when he was in Parliament. And that's why that Michael Laws is actually, you can see when I'm looking at him, 173 years old, because he hasn't had the time yet to figure out what he doesn't fucking know and how to repent from it. So let's just have a listen to what he had to say. Chester Burrows, remember, was Minister of Police and one of the guys pro banning gang patches. We've agreed we're not bashing National here, so I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just trying to reflect this idea of banning gang patches as, quote, a big headline. In other words, it gets the media and the people talking, but it has a negligible impact on crime. That's what you're quoted to have said in the Stuff article.
I mean, as far as as far as that sort of strategy or policy goes, it does have a negligible impact. And it could, of course, have a negative impact because if everyone takes their patches off, you don't know who's who in the zoo.
Yeah.
So you don't need to take.
But it does make for good copy, is what you're saying. It makes good headlines in the newspaper. But just to also reflect on that. So there you go. That's the part of the conversation you wanted to show. So that was me quoting him back to him and him agreeing that it makes for good copy and good headlines, but doesn't really do very much. So basically, Michael Laws is, I struggle to often tell if people are lying, but I'll just put it this way with those statements, whether he's overtly doing it or not.
I saw it and I was like, where have you got these numbers from? One of the things about National hammering home a massive increase in gang numbers is because the police started tracking it.
Yeah.
So it does look like an enormous blow up of numbers because it's never been looked at before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's something that Michael Laws has been associated with, and it's very much in his wheelhouse to be, look how tough I am. I took on the gangs. And that's why to this day there's no gang members in that area, and they'll never come back. And in fact, they all left So it's 15% is wrong. It's actually 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's laughable that, I mean, it was laughable when they brought it up. It's laughable now that they're going to attempt to pass it, that this will have a cooling effect on the gangs. It's not. It's not.
If you have a look at the TVNZ story tonight, the reason I didn't show the TVNZ story is I sometimes try and flip them around. We did the TVNZ story for the other one, and then we did TV3 for that one. But actually on the TVNZ story, it goes quite into depth as to who spoke out against the gang patch bill. And you'll be surprised to see, Chewy, much like we heard from Chloe last night about people who were speaking out against Karen Shaw's changes to the 7AA, most of the experts that they showed on TVNZ and most of the people who work in that world were speaking out against the banning of the gang patch. And if you're, as Chloe said yesterday, and the ones who aren't are National Act and New Zealand First. So let's go to that, because there are other ramifications for this. This is a lawyer who is representing the Mongrel Mob and some things, I understand, but she also made a submission on behalf of women and children associated with the Mongrel Mob. Let's have a listen to this part of the conversation. This is more about the whānau around gang members as well. And this might be the flow-on effect from these kinds of laws.
Just going through your submission on behalf of women and children associated with the Mongrel Mob, but your submission doesn't specifically mention this. Can you just clarify?
Sure. Well, earlier when I was talking to Anna about this issue, it's my position that this is a wider Bill of Rights issue that will affect everybody in New Zealand, not just those that are associated with the Mongrel Mob. It is very much a freedom of association issue and a Bill of Rights issue.
So how will these impact women and children associated with the Mongrel Mob?
Well, there are three parts to the proposed legislation. The first part is about the prohibition of gang insignia being displayed in public. The second are dispersal notices, and the third is the non-consorting orders. Now, they're very similar to non-association orders, that if the court or the police identify that you are an associated person with someone in a gang, then you're not allowed to associate with them. And my submissions, I go over examples if there was a tangihanga or a funeral on a marae, and there was a non-consorting order in place that would actually prevent you from being able to grieve with your whānau or family, Daniel.
And you know what the pro these laws people will say? Well, so what? Don't commit the crime then. But this is when you think of the holistic approach and how laws and stuff do impact beyond the punitive right there and then. But that's what they'll be saying. They'll be saying, well, who cares? Don't commit the crime. They won't be banned.
I think back to obviously my father's association with a motorcycle gang. He wasn't a patch member, but a lot of his friends were, and he certainly worked with a lot of patch gang members. So what does that mean? A non-association order, you know, you can't hang out with these people, so you can't work with them. Like it's the fluffy edges of this legislation that fucks me off. I keep coming back to the fact as well that we had a really good opportunity to hit the gangs where it hurts, and that was their revenue streams.
Yeah.
And National couldn't get over itself enough to realise that legalising cannabis would have had a negative effect on the gangs. They couldn't get out of their own way for that issue.
Yeah. And to their credit, David Seymour voted for that, because every now and again he decides he'll try and sell them as a libertarian party. But National was against it so much. All right, let's keep going with this story.
Arama, the government says, and you'll know this is all about safety. These proposed laws are about seeing gangs are out of control, they cause crime, and they even point to Western Australia and Queensland and look at their tough anti-gang laws. Doesn't imposing stricter conditions make New Zealand safer?
This wasn't answered very well by the lawyer, in my opinion, because what you need to do is say, doesn't it make New Zealand safer? You need to have a yes or a no for that, typically based on research. But what she does is pivot away and starts talking about the police being fashion police, But the question is, does it make society safer? And she didn't have an answer for that, which I thought was unfortunate. And there is probably better answers out there.
I think the real concern is asking the police to become fashion police. And with the gang insignia, that's exactly what we're asking our already overstretched, overburdened and underpaid police force to do. We are literally saying to them, if you see someone wearing an insignia that's in the particular list that may be a gang insignia, we want you to take action. And it's already been raised earlier on that the police simply don't have the resources to patrol or police this type of offending. And whilst the government says they want to get tough on crime, and we all know what the coalition agreement says, the actual impact of such legislation isn't going to work. And what I really want to see the government show us is research-based data and evidence that shows that this type of draconian legislation actually works.
Yeah, and so what she's calling for is perhaps what I just said she should have had. Is it fair though? Government hasn't therefore. But then again, we've been saying this for weeks about this government. It's the why. Why is cutting numbers of public servants better? Why? Not just that you're going to do it. Ask the one. I guess in her defence to my critique, which might have been unfair, she's asking the government why. Where's the research? And we hear the government talking about Western Australia, but we don't hear them talking about research and data and facts, which I know are a bit hard if you're sitting on the right of politics, thinking about facts and research, but you got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I saw from the in-person submissions was the fella, you saw the clip of him talking at the end of our clips, but coming in with this fella coming in with a couple of examples of patch alternatives.
Yep.
And he did quite the trick question on it of like identifying which ones are gang patches and which ones would be illegal. And then it was pointed out that that's a trick question because they're all gang paraphernalia, which is banned on Parliament grounds.
He pulled the shirt off, eh?
Yeah.
He had different T-shirts.
But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Is like they haven't defined what a gang patch is, to at least as far as I've seen.
No. I understand, and I think it said it on the TV1 story, so maybe I should have played the TV1 story. Or maybe it said it in the interview in the morning that there's going to be a list. And if it's, and like, because you've been talking about Destiny Church and their motorbike crew, I suspect they won't be on the list. So they'll be able to do it.
Oh, so there's going to be a named list of gangs.
I think so.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is even worse.
And I still would love to
find it.
I still would love to talk to someone from the Mongrel Mob, like I think you showed us, and we're not telling you to do this, but you can go to AliExpress and get Mongrel Mob paraphernalia. When they turn it into a fashion brand and every second 14-year-old's wearing it, what are the cops going to do then?
Because like, as far as the gangs are concerned, there is a very clear laid out of what a patch is.
Yep.
And the components of it is. So if they're going to, like, if it's only going to affect named organizations and exclude others that use the same paraphernalia, then that just makes this even more of a joke.
Yeah.
But the moment that they define what it is, then all these guys will do is just change.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, could they just change the mongrel and the Mongrel Mob patch by 15%? Everyone still knows what it is, but all of a sudden it's not the approved gang patch. Then what?
Well, all they have to do is put on a blue hoodie or a red hoodie, or a yellow hoodie, and now you're down to, well, you can't have those. Fuck, and another side issue that I want to mention. Okay, we've got all of these gangs like Tribesmen, Mongrel Mob, Black Power, Headhunters, Devil's Henchmen, Road Knights, all of these sort of guys, all big tough names, very tough logos, and then the one that always makes me giggle, Killer Bees.
Killer Bees, South Auckland. They wear yellow. So
they wear yellow, and it's the dumbest name. It's the dumbest name. Just always makes me laugh.
Couple of questions for you. The first is, remember I talked about that South African courtroom story last night?
Mm-hmm.
The pieces and reconciliation. I have that, which we could play at some stage, or we could do it on another night. It's not exactly as I remember it. I remembered a male voice reading it and it being 90 seconds. A female voice reads it and it's more like 3 minutes. But I got the story right. At least I got the story part. Okay. And it is quite religious, but it's also true. Because I heard it again today and I listened to it and I was like, geez, if I was hearing that for the first time today, I'd go, I don't believe that. So I did a little bit of research on it, and it's a true story. It's absolutely true, and it's accurate to how it's been told. And last night, if you weren't with us, we were talking about truth and reconciliation that went through South Africa, once apartheid finished. And the point that I made was, if there is a model there for other places to use, say Israel and Gaza, for example, it was the black South Africans who had to be the gracious, forgiving ones. The people with no power had to show all the power to go through and go past. And if anyone was going to relate that to the situation in the Middle East, it would have to be the Palestinians, because they're the ones with no power, being able to forgive and move forward. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not suggesting in any way that's what should happen, but if you're going to compare it to peace and reconciliation, that's what would happen. And they'd also need a Nelson Mandela type figure if you're going to compare it, because that was all a part of it.
The other part that I recalled as soon as we were off here last night is the other part of the story that I read talking about the truth and reconciliation thing, and why it was so revolutionary in a lot of ways, is from the ground up, the way that they treated it was everybody involved in this is a victim of the system.
Yeah.
And I hadn't considered that point. So even if you're a bad guy on the apartheid side of it, and you did nasty things, and you're hauled in front of this tribunal, the baseline was you were put in that position because the system that you worked in was evil.
Yeah. Sometimes there's no good. Sometimes
you're
there's
a victim as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I'm not saying it's the same, but like often abusers abuse. You know, if you're abused as a young child, you're a victim. And if you've learned that as the way to operate and you grow up to an adult and you abuse, then you're both a perpetrator and a victim. You can be a victim whilst being the perpetrator as well in a situation. We could play it. Do you want me to play it? Or should we keep going? And if we've got time at the end, we'll play it. And if we don't, we'll play it tomorrow or something. What do you think?
I think we should keep going and see what we've got at the end.
So, because we've still got the good news story as well. This, I think, we've already talked about this once tonight, about the government pushing away and pushing off responsibility for the bad things that they're doing and saying. This was a perfect example this morning on the AM show with Lloyd speaking to the Prime Minister. Because Lloyd is very clear. He talks about cutting senior customs roles. He talks about something 2 out of 3 of police dog handlers roles are going. 2 out of 3. And they all sound like frontline positions. And the Prime Minister palms it all off to the chief executives. Now, that's the first part about this I want to play to you. And there is another really, really, really important part. And I actually said this last night, how the Prime Minister is now saying it's about frontline services. It's about frontline services, not frontline staff. We're not making cuts to frontline services. And I was concerned about that because it sounds like they could therefore get rid of a whole bunch of frontline staff and just say the services are still there and kind of provide it services with fewer people. And he said again today in this interview, we've said all along it's services. And I went, did you say all along it's services? And I went back last year and did a Google search, and he's right. He was talking about services. I haven't found anywhere. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. They were talking about frontline staff, but I did notice a common refrain around that, which I'll get to as well. So let's go to the first part of this conversation where Lloyd's talking to him about cutting senior customs roles, and we have to hear what he says about that.
Cutting senior customs officers at Auckland, Whangarei, Gisborne, Invercargill, Timaru, are those frontline roles?
Well, look, ultimately those are decisions left for the chief executives of the government agencies. All we've said to them is, look, we need you to generate some savings, look at your organisations, make sure that you've got everything focused on delivering better frontline services and outcomes for New Zealanders. How you choose to organise your structures is up to you.
Now, the first point is, but that's not true. And this, I wish I was sitting in Lloyd's seat, because what I would have said at that moment is, but that's not true, is it, Mr. Luxon? Because you didn't let the chief executive cancel the suicide prevention office, which he was going to do. So don't be fooled by what Christopher Luxon is saying, because if he truly believed what he was saying, and if they were truly going to do that and let chief executives decide, then there'd be no more suicide prevention office. Remember what happened? There was an uproar in the community, and all of a sudden, the ministers got involved to tell the chief executives what to do. So don't believe him when he keeps talking here about it's up to the chief executives, it's up to the chief executives. The truth is it's up to the chief executives when it's expedient for the ministers to be able to duck their heads. Mm-hmm. As soon as the chief executives make a decision that's not expedient for the ministers, then they'll pop their heads up and they'll say no. So what he's doing is he's speaking out both sides of his mouth, and he's trying to wash his hands of these decisions, when he wants to. However, when the decisions go too far to prove an embarrassment for the government, they then get involved. Now, you can't have it both ways. You're either involved or you're not. What you're telling us is you're not involved until you are. Then you are involved. So what he's saying right now is not true. I wish Lloyd had said, but that's not true, is it, Mr. Luxon? And then given the example of the suicide prevention office. But Chewy, he didn't. He didn't have it at his fingertips. He didn't think about it. He didn't know, whatever. But yeah, this is one of the main points I want us to share with us tonight and have it at our fingertips, that when people say this, it's not true. Anything, Chewy?
No, I'm not surprised. It's getting down to the point where people are losing their jobs and they're from the pointy end.
Yeah.
Yep. And he can't. It is going to come down to, do less with more. There's already people going off, customs and Timaru is stretched thin as it is. I saw some comments on Reddit today about midwives in hospitals and people working in hospitals being told that there's no more overtime, there's no more covering people's shifts, there's all of these sort of things, and this budget bite is going to have effects. Yep. And we are going to see those over the next 24 months. And I hope everyone's got a memory. They can write it down in a little book.
Yes.
That this is where it starts, that we were promised something and they didn't do their numbers and it's all fucked. And the landlords have got to get their money. So I guess we're just going to have to muddle through, stiff upper lip style.
They let into the decision-making room a couple of far-right lunatics, which are also causing this National Party to have to go further to the right on their decisions, or else they'd never get anything done. We can never forget that as well. Remember, Mr. Luxon, you open the door. Anything that breaks, you own. We'll keep going.
To deliver that task. That's what we hold them accountable for.
Have you told them not to touch frontline roles?
Well, in the case of customs, for example, I think from memory there's about 80 roles being disestablished. Half of those are actually vacant roles today, so there's actually nobody in those jobs. There's also restructuring of the CE's leadership team, as I understand it. There's also restructuring of the communications team. But ultimately that CE and that minister need to know that they're actually organising that department to actually deliver those outcomes. And that's okay. Organisations need to evolve. Organisations need to...
Unless they make a decision that the minister's not happy with, I'm going to keep saying this, you'll be sick of me by the end of this clip, like the Suicide Prevention Office, then very quickly ministers get involved.
Be retuned to make sure they actually deliver outcomes for New Zealanders.
And we've heard that from you for about a year now about
exactly.
outcomes.
Well, it's very simple. We're moving the back office priority and resources to make sure we protect and enhance frontline
Well, it doesn't sound like you are, because these are frontline roles. These are people who are preventing drug traffickers from coming into our ports. And these, Timaru, a drug dealer's now going to start targeting Timaru now.
Well, I just say to you, we are a government that is going to restore law and order. You've seen
That's not the answer to the question, Mr. Luxon. You were asked directly, will drug importers now be focusing on Timaru because customs have been decimated? And your answer to that is, we're going to get tough on crime. It's not the answer, Mr. Luxon.
Yesterday, around 3 strikes, you've seen that with the investment in more police officers coming. You've seen that with respect to gang laws. You'll continue to see that with respect to youth offending. So I would, actually just let the process run.
Go to.
That sounds like, we're not going to stop it at the border, but we'll definitely catch it once it's in. Trust us.
We're not going to stop it at the border where Mr. Asia's sending it in, and I use that phrase because of Mr. Asia in the 80s. But what we'll do is when the young youth sell it on the street, we'll definitely get it then, and they'll go into one of our 5,000 new beds. Something like that, Chewy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And now prisons are rammed, and we need to find more beds. And we can't afford it. But here comes Serco, and they're going to open some private prisons.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
Run, and I'd let, as we all be confirmed in the budget, but I just say to you, we have been given very clear instructions to say we're ending wasteful spending, we're stopping dumb programs that aren't working, we're very comfortable to have organisations reorganise themselves so that they can actually deliver.
No, Lloyd's got a good question here about that.
Improved outcomes for New Zealanders.
Okay, is dumb spending is training detector dogs? Is that dumb spending? Because 2 out of 3 detector dog training roles, you're getting rid of those.
Again, those will be issues for actual CEs of biosecurity in this case, or customs, to make sure that they've got the resources in the right places to deliver.
Unless there's massive drug importation goes up, then a minister will raise their head and say we must have more dogs that detect. So when it turns around and bites you in the ass, let me think, I'll get a random out of there, like the Suicide Prevention Office, then you'll get involved. You can't have it both ways, and we're not going to let you forget.
But the outcomes that we will hold them accountable for. Let's be really clear. I'm moving government to focus on outcomes and delivery to improve services for New Zealanders.
But how do you do that?
How CEOs then choose to do that, how they choose to spend their budgets, how they choose to use their human resources, how they choose to use their priorities around the programs that they're doing, stopping stuff that's not working, putting more resources into things that are. That is how CEOs get different results with actually the same amount of money or different use of deployment of resources. So
notice the stutter? With the same amount of money, or because he couldn't quite say publicly, or far less money. That's where the lie comes out. Remember, when he stumbles, he's lying.
CEOs get different results with actually the same amount of money or different use of deployment of resources. So, I just want everyone to understand, just that the quantum of money is important. As I said, we're going to invest more in the budget and some of our key frontlines.
There you go. And he goes on. Now, Chewy, I've got one other thing I want to add to this.
He's got the money. He's got the money. He's got a massive pool of money that is currently earmarked for landlords. Yeah. You make all of these problems go away. He chooses not. There is something he will not touch. I wonder why that is.
And remember, that's one of the other things we will not let them forget. We will not let them forget when they try and say, we can't afford it. No, you've just made choices. Now, pardon me, here's a really important thing as well. They have been saying frontline services, not frontline roles. However, every time that I found, I mean, looking back to see if that was true and accurate, and it seems to be, but what they also do is every time they talk about frontline services, here's a speech from the 87th National Party Conference, for example. This is Nicola Willis's speech. Every time they talk about frontline services, they link it to frontline roles. So they might be saying services, but the example they give of the services is always the roles. Here's an example straight out of Nicola Willis's speech. Billions of dollars have been wasted on consultants, centralisation, and ideological projects instead of bolstering the frontline services. We need more nurses, doctors, and midwives. So she said frontline services, but then she explained what that meant was more individuals on the front line. So do not allow this government now to change the narrative when they go, no, we're not talking about roles, we're talking about services. Because right up until now, every time they've talked about services, they've given the example of more human beings. So they've been talking about the roles. I'll read it again. Instead of bolstering the frontline services, we need more nurses, doctors, and midwives. So they're giving examples of frontline staff. Don't let them flip the switch now. And when frontline staff get cut, they'll start to say, we never talked about staff. We always talked about services. When you talked about services, you quantified it by talking about staff. We can't let them do it, Joey.
The amount of problems that the government can solve by, I've said quite a few times that National are short-term thinkers, and it's really hard when you're trying to solve big problems like how do we retain our police, how do we retain our nurses, how do we get more young doctors coming through and then staying in this country.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about that time and time again, and it's something that this government will not see. They just kind of think that they magic them together, and if they leave the country, then they're just disloyal pricks anyway, and we just won't worry about it. The money's there.
Yeah.
Again, if they want to solve a problem, they work out what the problem is, identify it, work out how you fund it. And I'm sorry, but if you need to tax the rich a little bit more so we have fully staffed ED units and nice hospitals and nice schools with people learning and upskilling themselves so they can work better jobs and make more money and create more business, we get our investment money out of dead housing and into new businesses and new inventions and new industries. That's like Luxon loves to talk about being one of the best small countries in the world.
Greatest little country.
Yeah, but he keeps on going back to the same tired shit that has related us into this broken system. There are no new ideas.
Yeah.
He just thinks he's going to come because he was a CEO once.
Was he?
And a CEO that very clearly thought the front line of Air New Zealand was definitely at the front end of the plane and not in the cabin.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly how he sees this country as well.
I didn't realise. Did he work for Air New Zealand, did he? I wasn't aware of that.
A little bit. He tries to hide that in his resume.
Lots going on, guys. I want to get to some of these super chats, Chewy, because there's been a lot coming in that we haven't shown. So thank you, guys. Nate says, bless you, Chewy. It's a bit long. Sneezing on stream must be a new funding mechanism for BHN. Thank you for your super chat there, Nate. Mr. Arvid says, breaking news, this just in, Mark Mitchell is entering the race for the worst human ever with Israeli ambassador and David Seymour. Oh, we could do like a worse off at the end of the week. Peter says, the only way the Bill of Rights Act is worth a damn if it protects people society doesn't like. Peter said it much better than I was trying to say. So most of us don't need protections in the law to protect us from not doing something bad or like I said, the free speech. But the people who say revolting things are the ones who need the free speech protection. More from Mr. Arvids. Hey, do better with less. Kind of what you were saying there, Chewy, as well. Kiwi Bird also says, nothing annoys me more than politicians, e.g. Luxon, comparing government to running a business. They are not the same. Thank you for your super chat there. Gold, response to Luxon, you first for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Gold. And Jackson Media says, gang patches are more dangerous than drugs? ? Drugs at the end of it as well. I've got a good news story for us, Chewy.
Cool.
Not that.
Oh, it's the dog again. The dog's still there. That's breaking news.
2018, my mother passed away from motor neuron disease. It was a travesty for so many reasons, but one of the reasons was she was really healthy, like physically healthy. She was really physically healthy. Great blood pressure, great heart, never had any kind of scares with cancer, like was really healthy. Could have been one of these mums that went till they were 90. You know, but motor neuron disease got her at 78, which is still a pretty good innings, right? You know, a lot of people would plead for 78, but it was the kind she had the kind of health that could easily have seen her for another decade. Seen her grandkids get older and that kind of stuff. And this is an announcement that's just come out in the last couple of days about a pretty amazing thing happening in a New Zealand laboratory. New Zealand scientists see a major breakthrough for motor neuron disease as our good news story of the night.
So this is some brain tissue that's been stained to see where the proteins lie.
It's precious and invaluable. Human brain tissue, and more than 40 Kiwis and international patients, many who died from motor neuron disease, generously donated theirs to Dr. Emma Scotter. It's led to a medical breakthrough. She and her team at University of Auckland have figured out how to tell the difference between harmful and harmless mutations of a rare gene causing the disease.
I would say it's a breakthrough in
in understanding the genetic code. So we're really excited that you can now look in the tissue and understand what went wrong.
So for those who have a genetic test that gives a red flag for the gene, it can be determined whether they're at risk of MND or not. Work towards a treatment which would eliminate rogue versions of the gene is now underway in Dr. Scotta's lab. She's also working with live patients who donate blood to test their genes to determine a genetic cause.
That's what people really want to know. What does this mean for my children? Are they at risk? And in one case, we've been able to go back to the family and say, we found the cause of your motor neuron disease, and the family were able to be tested, and the younger generation could have a baby born free of that gene.
She describes it as the most amazing and heartwarming experience from their genetic testing.
Being able to change the fate of a family, no longer passing down this gene and risking passing down motor neuron disease.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the whole team were in tears.
Yeah. About 400 Kiwis are tonight living with motor neuron disease. In about 90% of cases, there is no known family history. The rest is known to be inherited. Scientists have linked 35 genes to the disease and believe environmental toxins play a role. What's not in doubt is the disease can be brutal.
People lose the ability to move everything, including the muscles of breathing. From diagnosis to death, around 2 years, total of 3 years from onset. That's the average.
She now hopes her work will continue to provide important pieces in the giant puzzle of motor neuron disease. Amanda Gillies, News.
Pretty cool story. Obviously personally, why I think it's a pretty cool story, but pretty cool story. And we had a whānau meetup 2 Saturdays ago, and one of the suggestions, I was going to say complaints, suggestions was we should have a good news story every now and again. And I saw that and I just went, oh, this is cool. What a cool story. We got to play this one.
This is something that I love. When they started doing the Human Genome Project decades ago now, this sort of stuff was part of the promise of that program.
Yeah.
When we start getting into gene sequencing and realizing what happens with the mutations and what can be turned off and on again, and it's this painstaking, methodical work by researchers to go through that code almost line by line of what makes us and what can really shunt us off the line. Like, you know, I've mentioned on the show, you know, I have ADD, and that has gone through people going, oh, it's environmental, to actually there's a genetic component of it and it's inherited and that sort of thing. And when people identify these things, you can start to try and fix it. Yeah. You think of terrible diseases like Parkinson's and MS and that sort of thing would be in that same wheelhouse as well.
For sure.
And then you get onto inherited cancers. And it's that work towards eliminating those sort of things. You know, things that would have been, you know, cancer diagnoses that you know, breast cancer is the big one. They've identified a lot of the genes that make you more susceptible to breast cancer, and people are able to make choices before it affects them. That's amazing sort of stuff. Really, really mind-blowing.
Yeah. So there you go. Good news story. Did it for you. Do you want to hear the South African courtroom story? It's a pretty cool story, but it could also be played any time that we're talking about Gaza or whatever. Only because we talked about it last night. I have it here, or we could wrap up. I'm easy either way to you. You can decide.
You go on. Pull the trigger on it.
So, again, for those of you who were with us last night, we talked about Israel and Gaza, and the conversation kind of came around to truth and reconciliation that happened in South Africa. And I was reminded of I used to work with a group who made radio shows for News Talk ZB, produced them, and they played them out. This was one of the pieces of audio made for that. As I said, I listened to it again today for the first time maybe in 10 years, I don't know. And I kind of, my bullshit nerve went, because it is quite a, you know, the vibe of it is quite vitriolic and stuff. But I did some research and it's all accurate. I found several places where they were reporting all this information just as it said. So I believe it to be true. And the person who this is focusing on, the mother of a lost husband and child during apartheid South Africa, is obviously a religious person. So she evokes some religious ideas around why she can get through this. And I'm sure you're all big boys and girls can handle that. And the reason we were talking about this is when Chewie started talking about truth and reconciliation, I realised that in South Africa, the truth and reconciliation really only worked because the powerless were able to, for want of a word, be the bigger people and were able to forgive and move forward rather than necessarily looking for retribution. And if that was related to the Middle East, the powerless at the moment are the Palestinians. And could there ever be a time in the future where a similar model was used? Don't get me twisted. I'm not saying that should happen. It's none of my business overall. But if it was going to be compared to what happened in South Africa, it would be the powerless actually saying to the powerful, we forgive you. So let me play this audio for you. There's no video for it, so you'll just get to see me and Chewie's lovely faces. There's a bunch of music at the end that I'll fade out before it gets here, but you can have a listen. Tell me what you think.
Didn't say it was going to start
Imagine
with a banger.
crowded courtroom in South Africa. A frail black woman in her 70s rises slowly to her feet. Facing her across the room are several white security officers from the former apartheid regime. They keep their eyes to the ground rather than engage her. One of them is Mr. Vanderbroek. He's been tried and found guilty of the murders of both her son and her husband. The scene is one of many from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission trials in South Africa just a few short years ago. And this is a true story. The old woman's loss is enormous, and she stands with tears in her eyes as the details of the crimes are read out loud, clearly and bluntly to those assembled. Mr. Vanderbroek had come to this woman's house some years before. He took her son, shot him at close range, and then burned his body while he and the other officers partied nearby. Later, the same man returned and took her husband. For 2 years, she heard nothing of him. Then she was taken to see her husband bound and beaten and laying on a pile of wood. The last words the old woman heard her husband say before he was burned were, "Father, forgive them." Now this elderly woman stands in a courtroom and listens to the confession offered by Mr. Vanderbroek. The commissioner turns to the woman and asks simply, "So what do you want? How should justice be done to this man who so brutally destroyed your family?" "I want 3 things," begins the old woman, calmly and confidently. "First, I want to be taken to the place where my husband's body was burned, so that I may gather up the dust and give him a decent burial.
Jesus.
Secondly, my husband and son were my only family. I want Mr. Vanderbroek to become my son. I would like him to come to my township once a week and spend a day with me, so that I can pour out whatever love I have still remaining in me. Finally, I would like Mr. Vanderbroek to know that I offer him my forgiveness, because Jesus Christ died to forgive. This would also have been my husband's wish." The old woman stops and pauses. Then she asks, "Would someone please lead me over to Mr. Vanderbroek, so that I may embrace him and let him know that he is truly forgiven?" Overwhelmed, Mr. Vanderbroek collapses while friends of the old woman, all victims of decades of oppression, gather around her and begin to sing.
Sing. Homeless, homeless. And look, no one's going to sit here and go, that was happening in every courtroom in South Africa all through that time. It's one example. but that was the example that came to mind when I thought about how would you get past, after Chewy mentioned truth and reconciliation, how would you get past those kinds of conflicts, those kinds of genocide? Is the only way you can do it, again, not saying anyone should, would or could do this, just pondering it out loud, is the only way forward having the powerless actually be the ones to do the forgiving, or what? I don't know. I got no answers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to tell you guys we got it all sorted, but Chewy, I heard a few exclamations from you in there. If you want to offer anything, you're more than welcome to.
Jesus. Yeah, I'm going to echo what a few people have said in the chat. I don't think I would have had the power to do what she did.
Yeah, of course. I think that's the reason it's such an amazing story. And I'll say again, I've done the research today, and it appears to be all true exactly as it's been told. So, and again, no one's saying that happened in every courtroom. No one's saying that the mother in the courtroom next door didn't want to see, them have a tyre filled with petrol put around their necks to repeat it. But that was a story. And I don't know, I guess from my sort of personal ideology, I think about the way forward is often through empathy and forgiveness. Again, I'm not saying that the weakest and the ones with no power should do the forgiving. That's not my place to say, but I do know that often reconciliation comes with forgiveness from one of the parts to be able to move forward. Because if you don't have that, what you've got is constantly, they started on October the 9th, they started in 1948, and just where does it stop? Someone at one stage has to do it. So I don't know. Again, no comments about me telling people to just turn the other cheek. I'm saying that's an example.
At the end of the apartheid regime, remember, one of the very clear consequences that people thought were going to happen was a very bloody settling of scores.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that what has happened in South Africa since has been an easy road. It certainly hasn't. I don't think. I don't think it's a road that's even finished yet. But when it came to what they avoided with the truth and reconciliation stuff, I think they avoided a bloodbath.
Yeah. Yes, probably an inappropriate time to segue now, but just a reminder, shops all open. We are fundraising for medical aid for Palestinians, anyone who buys some buffer gear this week, and there's black and greys as the colours we've gone with this week, and I can see that a couple of people have purchased tonight. 25% of the profits from these tops, the buffer tops, go towards the charity Medical Aid for Palestinians, who I'm hoping to have one later this week to have a chat, and all of their other regular gear is up there. It will be up there for the next week, and if you'd like to both support us and support the charity that we are donating to this month, Medical Aid for Palestinians, it's up here if you want to check it out for yourself, map.org.uk, then we'd love to have you on board. Other than that, Chewy, there's only one other thing I'll probably leave you with. Maybe that one. Maybe that one. She hasn't moved. She's still in exactly the same spot.
It's a photo. It's not a video.
And that's us done. Are you going to pick up your one now? So you get to pick yours up.
Meet the people.
I'll set up dog cam again one time soon.
Oh. Hello. You going to say hello?
Woof.
No.
Woof. All right, team. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I notice, Chewy, that David Seymour was on Bomber's show tonight, so I might have to have a look at that tomorrow and see if there's anything to come from that. Talking about Karen Chahor and them trying to basically negate the Waitangi Tribunal. Oh, there's a big yawn. You going for a walk tonight with the dog, or you done that?
Shh. Can't hear
Did I
you.
say walk? Oh, I can't say that. I can't say the PARK word more so than walk for my one. All right, guys. Thanks so much. I'm very happy to see you guys enjoy that piece of audio, because to be honest, when I listened to it this afternoon, I went, I don't know if people will want to hear this, but people seem to think it was good, so I'm appreciative for you. We will catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another. Oh, we got any more? Sorry, because people gave us super chats when I mentioned them. Nate says there was a part in Luxon's interview where he couldn't confirm that CEs weren't out to get him, or that he had confidence in them. Really bad look. Yeah, that was asked as well. And Jeremy says doggos, please. So there you go. Just before we go, had the dogs for Jeremy, and Citizen Gold's got a fresh take on something. Says David Seymour, I heard he's a terrible human being. It's a new thought.
Here's the doggo.
All right, guys, we'll catch you tomorrow night.
Of the doggo.
Catch you from tomorrow night from another edition of Big Hero News. Thanks for being with us tonight. We'll see you from 9. Be safe. Come back tomorrow night. Remember, bring a friend. We'll catch you then. Hooroo.